So welcome everyone to MPAC's FIMS learning webinar focusing on reports today. A couple of housekeeping notes. We are recording this and you will be able to find the link to this in our knowledge base. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter it in the Q&A. I'm Amy Strum, the Director of Client Success here at NPACT, and today you will have the pleasure of learning the force of reports with FIMS from Robin, and we also have Leanne in the wings helping with some of our questions. With that, I'd like to pass it off to Robin to review the agenda.
Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. So today's agenda, we're going to cover several different things. Reports versus exports. What is the difference? We're going to look at FIMS Help Online in the reports chapter and how helpful that can be when trying to create reports. We're going to look at some different reporting methods within FIMS. We're also going to take a look at how to run a standard FIMS report and how to run a standard FIMS export. Next. Okay, so we're going to start with the question, what exactly is the difference between a report and an export? So a report creates a data file that is visible on the screen before you decide whether this is something that you want to print or whether this is something you don't want to print. You do also have the ability to save this as a text file and open it in Word or Excel because you cannot edit the data from within the FIMS viewer. Next, please. And an export creates a data file, but it's in a different format. A copy of this data is not visible before it is exported, but it's creates a file outside of FIMS, which you can then use to open in Excel, or you can link it to merge templates, could be thank you letters, could be labels, could be envelopes. So two very different purposes for reports and exports. So depending on what you need, what you're trying to achieve, will make the difference on whether you're running a report or an export. All right, let me share my screen and we'll hop right into FIMS. Want to make sure I'm sharing the right one.
We can see your FIMS screen, Robin.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. I just wanted to make sure they could see the right thing. All right. So FIMS provides over 200 ready to run reports and exports. From the reports menu, you can see here in the drop down, I have access to all of the reports from profile module, the gifts module, any of the modules that I have in my system. I have access to the full listing of reports from here. The difference being if you are actually in the profile module, for example, if I click on reports, at the top of the list, I see all of the reports that pertain to the profile module. So these are context sensitive, depending on which module you're in. Those are the reports you're going to see at the top, but you still do have access to the other modules reports from the drop-down list. Now, in FIMS Help Online, and I'm going to go to Help, FIMS Help Online. And I'm going to drag this over. Sorry, I don't want to make anybody dizzy. Okay, so within FIMS Help Online, what you're going to do, FIMS product documentation. And if we scroll down, we can see there's a chapter called FIMS Other Features. And from within there, there's one specifically called Reports. So in this Reports chapter, you can actually see, the reports. There is information in here. There's documentation that tells you how to run reports. So for example, if you're looking at run standard FIMS reports, this goes through how to run a report. So this is explaining the information I was just talking about, where you have access to all of the reports from a single menu item. It talks about the selections window. All these things I'm going to cover today, but if you want to go back and research any of this later, or just want to double check, you can go back to this information in FIMS Help Online. You also have the ability to see here. For example, each chapter, each module has its own chapter. So in the profile reports, there's one for profile listing. This gives you information about the report, and it also shows you what the report's going to look like. Because this is a predefined standard report, you don't have the ability to change the columns of data that are shown on the report. So this is kind of a nice peek, so you don't have to go through and run all the reports just to see what they look like. There is also, for some of these, for example, export to word processing. Instead of having to export the information and then look at the data file, there's a nice chart here that tells you exactly which fields are being exported with this particular choice. There's also, for example, there's tips in here on how to run some of these reports. For example, let me go to the gift module, donor and gift reports, gift history. Let's say that you would like to be able to know how to run a gift history report that excludes all of those adjustments that you've had to make, gift reversals, adjusting gifts. You'd like to see a nice clean list of only gifts that are correct. Well, in this particular section, there is some tips that explain how to run this report and just only see those gifts that have been not adjusted. So you won't see reversals and you won't see any adjusted gifts. So it's a great resource. Awesome. And it, like I say, it gives you pictures of all of the reports. So let's go back to FIMS and let's start taking a look at the different ways you can report information out of FIMS. So the first one is just a simple on-screen inquiry. And if you go to the inquiries menu item, you can look up a fund ID, you can see the foundation status, you could do a general ledger account inquiry. So here we go. So if I was to look up an account, let's see. And let's say I wanted to just take a screenshot of what I am looking at here. So we'll go to the checking account. You do have, and this is a Microsoft Windows option, the little snipping tool. So you could take a snapshot of any of the information from within FIMS, and it's really kind of a cool tool. I love this tool. You can choose exactly the area that you want to take a snapshot. So if you're doing an on-screen inquiry, something that you can't print directly out of FIMS, you do have the ability to use the snipping tool to get a copy of that. The next is your standard ready to run reports that are available from the reports menu. So this is something we're going to dig into a little bit more just shortly. Another way to get information out of the system or reporting method is your trends and analysis. So trends and analysis reports, they summarize data. So for example, let me just show you one for the fund module. Asset analysis by division. And I'm just going to run this. I'm not making Here we go. So this report is summarizing the information. It's giving me total assets based on the division and the subtype. So it's telling me how many funds and the breakdown of all of the different types of funds. So this is a trends and analysis. As you can see, it is summary information. So the profile module, the gifts module, the grants module, the funds module, they all have access to this trends and analysis summary reporting, depending on what sort of information you're looking for. Another way to get information out of the system is the standard export in the system. So for example, user-defined profile export, that's a predefined list of fields that are being exported. So that's another way to get information out. And then you also have user-defined exports. So I happen to be in the list of reports and exports for the profile module. So you have user-defined profile export. The nice thing about this is you have the ability to choose which fields that you want to export. And if you click the little drop down here, there's quite a few fields that we have access to from within the profile user-defined export. So that's another way to get information out. Another way is reports and exports from your data grids. So this little button to the left side of the data grid is called process selections. And if I click on this, I have the ability to either run a report or an export based on the data that's currently in my data grid. And since the data grids are user definable, it's pretty much what I consider to be an ad hoc report writer. You can define what you want for columns of information and the records you want displayed in the data grid. And then you can either export or you can print a report straight from that information that's in there. So this one's a pretty powerful way to get information out because it's you have the control over what you're actually seeing or what you're exporting. Another reporting method that we have is in General Ledger. There's actually two in General Ledger. And that's under design statements. So there is a tool, there is a report tool that you can use to design your financial statements. And this just happens to be a listing of all of the ones that I have out here right now. And then the last option that I have is Fund Statement Designer. That is a Fund Statement Designer tool where you can print fund statements directly out of FIMS. And I will show you what one of those looks like. And we'll talk a little bit about the Saved Reports tab as well. And I'm going to choose the fund that I want to run a fund statement for. So the first thing that comes up is what you're probably all used to seeing. But what this is helpful for is you can actually just verify that the data is correct. But up here under external statements, I'm going to say preview, and this is what my fund statement designer fund statement looks like. Drag this over so y'all can see. So this is a fund statement that I designed in the fund statement designer with basic information. You can pick and choose which fields you want visible on these fund statements, whether you want a quarter to date, year to date column. And then the nice thing is on the second page, you have all the detail, the gift detail, the grant detail, and any pledge detail that was made. And there were no fund expenses for this period of time. So Fund Statement Designer, again, if you want to get away from using Microsoft Word for whatever reason, this is also this is something that could be used. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a standard FIMS report. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to use the profile listing. Okay. So the first tab that we have here on the left, most of your standard reports, you're going to see that the tabs are pretty much the same. Depending, there might be something different. You might find one report that exports notepads as well as other information. But for the most part, you're going to run them the same. So the first tab that we have here is called Selections. And what the Selections tab does is it allows you to filter the records that are going to show up in your report. So the report itself is predefined. So what you're not doing here is you're not choosing the fields that are going to show up on your report. That report has been predefined already. What you do have the ability to filter is which records show up. So if you look on the right-hand side, you can see when I went to run this report, I automatically had active profile in city in here. I'll explain how you can do this in just a little bit, but for now, what I'm saying is I only want to see active profiles, and I want to see profiles that have a city in Concord. So if you look on the left-hand side, see how it says frequently used fields. Most of the standard FIMS reports do have a set of frequently used fields. That doesn't mean that it's going to be appropriate for what you need to filter by. So all you have to do is click the drop down. These are the tabs that I have access to for filtering information in the profile module. If I was trying to run a gift history report, the field would be different because the topic of what I'm trying to get out of the system is different. It's gifts or donors versus regular profiles. So if you don't see what you're looking for in frequently used fields, then you can most definitely click the drop down and see what else there is. You also see anybody that has the FieldMaker module, FieldMaker fields are also available here to use for filtering. Now, if for some reason you were to just come into this report and not choose any filter criteria whatsoever or filter by affiliation codes, this report, when you click on Run Report, is going to list out every single profile in your database. So one thing to keep in mind, if you have a lot of profiles and you don't put any filter criteria, they're all going to show up on this particular report. All right, one other thing on the Selections tab before I move, if you look on the right-hand side down here, it says Selection Criteria. If I click on that, what this is showing me is essentially that my query down below is saying active profiles, yes, and profiles that have the city of Concord. What that essentially means is that any records that show up on this report have to meet both criteria. So you do have the ability to make changes if for some reason you're filtering based, you'd rather like it to be or instead of an and, you can come in here and make those changes. And you may find that some of the predefined selection criteria doesn't necessarily fall in line with what you want. So you definitely can make changes there. All right. So I'm going to move to the sorting tab. So if you look at the sorting tab, we also have frequently used fields, but you can choose the drop down and pull fields from other places. So you've got access to all the profile 1 fields or the profile 2 fields. Right now, my saved report is doing an alpha sort, and at the bottom, I can do an ascending or descending depending on what I want. Now, in the sorting tab, you also have the ability, some of the reports that have dollar amounts, you can subtotal or do a totals only by dollar amount. So I'm going to go to reports. I'm going to go to the gift module, and I'm going to go to gift history report. And this, as an FYI, this filter right here is filtering so that I don't see any adjusted gifts or reversing gifts. And I'm going to go to the sorting tab. And what I'm going to do is I am going to sort by gift type. So I'm going to add that by clicking on the add button. And I'm going to say subtotal. The nice thing about this little subtotal button here is that it puts a field on the report that wouldn't normally be on the report. So for example, if you look at subtotaled, I have 9 gifts that don't have any gift type because there's a blank right there. But if I scroll down to the next batch, I have 36 gifts that are categorized as cash with a total. And the nice thing here is it's showing me all of the detail, the 36 gifts that are included. But the fact that it gives me a subtotal for cash, I wouldn't normally see that description there in this particular report. And we also have, let's see. Check and in kind. So I've got a subtotal for each of these different gift types. You can also rerun the report, and under the sorting tab, you can click totals only. This is kind of cool because this is just going to shrink the whole report up and give you 1 row per gift type. So here's my blank. It still tells me how many gifts were there, but it gives me 1 row, so I don't have to see all the detail, especially if I don't want to see the particular detail. So this is just a great way for bringing something into a report, a description you might not normally see, or getting a quick view at what this looks like. All right, I'm going to go back to my profile listing. And we're going to look at the affiliations tab. So the affiliations tab is a tab that you can also use to filter the records that are showing up in your particular report. And affiliation codes determine how a profile is classified in your database. It could be mailing groups, could be committees, financial professionals. There's all kinds of different affiliation codes that you might want to use for your FIMS database, but it's just a great way. Affiliation codes are a great way to pull together a group of profiles. Maybe you're doing a mailing and you want all of the addresses. You can export that information to a file. So in this case, what I have done is added the affiliation codes donor. That means that they have a posted gift in the system. And I want to exclude any donors. So in my system, I've created an affiliation code for deceased donors. There is a date deceased on the donor record that can be used, but I just find that it's helpful to also be able to exclude that group of profiles pretty quickly here with deceased. So one thing I do want to say about this is that the relationship between the selections tab and the affiliations tab is an and. So what that means is any profiles that show up on my report, they have to meet the criteria on the selections tab and the criteria on the affiliations tab. Otherwise, they won't show up on the report. Another thing here with affiliations, the relationship between the multiple affiliations is an or. So in this case, it would be an or relationship. So if you had multiple, the profiles wouldn't have to have all of the affiliation codes. They would just have to have one of them. And you also have the ability to include or exclude. So if you notice, my donor has given, I've said include by checking the radio button, or I've said exclude by checking the radio button. The mailing tab, I'm going to skip for now because I'm going to talk more about that when we go look at the export, because from a reporting perspective, the mailing tab doesn't really, is not all that helpful. Now the saved reports. So if there are reports that you run on a regular basis that are have a lot of filter criteria to them, you can actually save that criteria. The tab says saved reports, and a lot of people think that means that you're saving the data and you're not going to get new data the next time you run it. You're not saving the data, you're just saving the criteria that you're using to filter records to build that particular report. So to add a new one, you would fill in whatever you needed, your selections, your sorting, affiliations. Then you'd come to this tab, you'd click the add button, and you would add a new saved report. And it tells you who the user was that created the new saved report. One other thing, I have a saved report here called default. Whatever criteria I have chosen when I created or added my saved report and named it default, I've said that I want this criteria to load automatically every time. So anytime I pull up the profile listing, that information that I have saved as part of default is here automatically. So my active profiles or my city of Concord. Another place where this might be handy, maybe in the fund module, you'd want to run a report that always excluded retired funds. You could set that up as part of your default. So that's what your default means when you create a saved report for defaults. Now to run a report and load any of this criteria, you could just come into the profile listing report, skip to the saved reports tab, go to inactive profiles, for example, load the selection, and it's going to put in automatically. Active profile, no, because I've said I only want to see inactive profiles. And then the last tab that we have here is the send to tab. And because this is a report, this defaults to the screen. But you also have the ability to add a subtitle to your particular report. And it would be better if I could type subtitle. And then we'll run the report, and this is going to show up on my screen. So here is my profile listing report. You also have another feature that you have that I absolutely love is rerun. So what rerun report does is it's going to bring up the exact same criteria that you just used to filter your report. So if there's something that you want to add or remove because it didn't work right, you have the ability to do that by clicking on rerun report. All right. The next thing that we're going to look at is the export. And to demonstrate the export, I'm going to use the standard export to word processing. Now, the selections tab, the sorting tab, the affiliations tab, and the saved reports tab all work exactly the same way as they do for reports. The selections tab is used for filtering data. The sorting tab is used to sort that data, however that's going to be sorted. Affiliations is also a filter, and then your saved reports tab. So if there's something that you're exporting on a regular basis, then you can save that in here. For example, board mailing labels. The way that I'm filtering those folks is strictly by the affiliations. So I have an affiliations code for board member, and that's what I've saved for my export. This particular export has the ability to export notepads as well, but that's unique to this particular export. What I want to show you here is the mailing tab. So on the mailing tab, you have the ability to choose a salutation. So if the purpose of exporting this information is for mailing, where it's a letter maybe, you're going to want to make sure that you choose the appropriate salutation if you want something other than the default. And this is pulling from the salutations tab in the profile module. So that's what this is looking at. Then the next field that you have over here is direct mail to address type. So let's say that you want to direct the mail to someplace other than the default address on the Profile 1 tab. You can choose that from the drop-down list. So I want to direct this to the board address because these are board members that I'm going to send a letter to. And then below that, you have a date, the date of mailing for alternate address control. So it's always going to default into the current date. And this could be important if you have an alternate address that does or is controlled by a from and through date. So this could be important, and you may not want the current date, you may want something else, but it will always default into the current date. Over here on the right-hand side, final sort for zip code, essentially based on the addresses that are being used for these profiles, it's going to sort them by zip code. There's an allow mail flag on all of your profiles. And if you check this box, it is going to basically ignore whatever that allow mail flag says for the profiles. Probably the only time you'd be using this would be if you're doing exporting information for trying to figure out totals or just data review. You might want to ignore that. Otherwise, if you're doing a mailing, you wouldn't check that box. This is going, the next one's going to capitalize addresses. It's going to do exactly what it says. And then here, use org name and individual profiles. So if an individual profile has an organization name in the Profile 1 tab, it will export that information along with the other profile information. And then the bulk mail recipient, this is kind of cool. This is sort of a head of household feature on the Profile 2 tab. Let's say you have 3 profiles for the same 2 people. The husband has his own profile, the wife, and they have a joint because they give differently and they want to be acknowledged as such. But if you're mailing them an actual, maybe an annual report or a newsletter, they only want 1, they don't want 3. So if you have that set up in the profiles, you can invoke the bulk mailing recipient feature. It's kind of nice because you can turn it on just when you need it and not use it if you don't need to. All right, the last tab that we have here is the send to tab. So because this isn't export, it automatically goes to file, and that's the only option that you have. On the right-hand side, it says what kind of format do you want to export it in. Depending on what you choose, it's going to vary what the field delimiter and record delimiters are. And what I have done is there's really only Microsoft Word, ASCII, Excel, and CSV. So in the handout that I put together for everybody that's at today's session, I've put in a little chart that tells you exactly what the field delimiter is and the record delimiter for each one of those different types. So you'll have that as a resource. At the bottom is your file name. So right now what this is saying is that when I click on that run report, this is going to export information to my C drive in the merge folder, and it's going to create a file, data file called profile.txt. If I want to change that and send it to a different location or even a different name, all I have to do is click on the little Save As button to the right, and it will give me access to my system, and I can choose where I want that data file to be exported. You also have the ability to auto launch a document if you have an on-premise version of FIMS. So if you've got a document in your Microsoft Word that's saved on your system, you can also do an auto launch. Otherwise, you can export the data. When I click on Run Report, that's going to come up and tell me how many records have been exported. So I've got 71 records that were exported. 2 were skipped because that allow mail flag was turned off. And the cool thing is you can also create mass create contact records or affiliations for those 71 records that were exported. And then at this point, you could take that data file and merge it into a Word template or use Excel to open it. I always tell people if you're exporting a file to be used in Excel, to use Excel to open it because it walks through a little import wizard that's very helpful. So that's all I have today. Thank you very much for joining and listening.
We have a couple questions for you, Robin.
Sure.
Chloe asked, will you be going over any reports for the grants module? She's interested in running a report to see which grantees have gotten grants in a certain time period.
So I'm not going over grant reports. Today was less so about the specific reports and more so about giving everybody kind of an overview so you'd have a little more confidence to be able to run a report from one of the other modules as well. But I am sure that the support team would be happy to help if you had a question about a specific report.
Thank you. There's another one is, if we have time, can you go back to where you went over the fund statement designer, or can we maybe schedule another session just on the fund statement designer?
I can show you. Do you want me to run the report in the fund statement designer or?
Thayer requested this, and he said they currently use a Word export and would be interested in a cleaner, more streamlined approach to designing, preparing, and printing that fund statement.
Sure, absolutely. I would be happy to help. We do have services above and beyond the standard FIMS support where I can take a look at what your current fund statement looks like in Word and determine what would need to be done to put it in fund statement designer. So yeah, absolutely. If you, Amy, would they contact you about service hours for that?
Certainly,
Or
certainly they can reach out to me, and the next slide I'll show we'll have my email address on it. So there you can reach out to me and we can schedule some time and get on Robin's schedule. There was another question, Robin, just that I thought we should talk about. It's ACH payments. One foundation is looking to run a report about all the vendors and grantees with ACH info and the last time it was updated. Leanne did share in the chat for anyone that's interested that the ability to report on ACH and data grids has been disabled for security reasons. So she did look up and attach a knowledge base article on there for everyone's knowledge.
awesome.
Great. Let's see. I think that is all of our questions currently. Let's see. Robin, I guess there's one more vendor question. Oh, how would you obtain profiles that are vendors?
So vendor profiles should have an affiliation code of vendor. So it would be easy to pull a list. So let me just let me just show you. Under system initial setup, there is under the mailing setup tab right here. It doesn't actually have vendor on here, but if you add a profile to your database and give them a vendor record, FIMS is automatically going to assign them an affiliation code of vendor. So you should be able to easily pull a list of profiles by using the affiliation code of vendor.
Great, thank you. I'm going to stop Robin's share. So we've gone through all of the questions. So if you have further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. My email is on here, as well as our FIMS at NPACT and hello@npact.com email addresses. Feel free to reach out. And we'll hope to see you all on the next Let's Talk Solutions. It's scheduled currently for August 9th. We are still taking topic ideas. So if you have any topic ideas, I'd love it if you'd share those. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Thank you.